Welcome to the motherfucking relay where we're covering today's top boxing news.
Okay, we'll start with this one. Michael Benson has tweeted, Carl Frampton versus Isaac Dogboe is reportedly set for a featherweight clash on November 30th in California. Meanwhile, it's claimed Michael Conlan versus Vladimir Nikitin will be rescheduled for December 14th in New York. So let's start with the proposed rematch of sorts between Olympic rivals turned pro boxers Mick Conlan and Vladimir Nikitin. For those of you who aren't already familiar with their rivalry, their situation, Mick Conlan, lost a controversial decision
to Nikitin
way back when at the Rio Olympics, and a rematch between the two has been long anticipated ever since. And these guys were actually supposed to have swapped punches already. They were supposed to have locked horns in August 3rd. But Vladimir Nikitin suffered a torn bicep and had to pull out. And initially, where these guys were supposed to be swapping punches for the second time, in Northern Ireland, in Belfast, essentially Mick Conlan's backyard, they have since changed the venue and it's going to be going down in New York. You wonder that this fight isn't better suited, wouldn't get a better crowd reaction and an overall turnout in Ireland as opposed to New York City. I mean, there's no shortage of Irish in New York, but I don't think the Irish in New York are as familiar with Mick Conlan as the people over there in Belfast. It seems like a common sense thing that if you're gonna do the thing and you can have it over there, then why not have it over there? I don't know, maybe, New York seems like more mutual ground. I mean, there is plenty of Irish there, but for Vladimir Nikitin, it is more neutral than going to fucking Northern Ireland, wouldn't it? It is more neutral ground.
For him.
I don't know if that had anything to do with the decision, what influenced staging it in New York instead of Belfast. I don't know that has anything to do with it, but it might, you never know. Now, this is all set to be going down in December 14th. But the proposed fight that really grabbed my attention wasn't the Conlan-Nikitin fight, because I viewed that as an eventuality, something that sooner or later is going to happen. I was confident that fight would come off. The fight that grabbed my attention is actually the Carl Frampton versus Isaac Dogboe fight. This fight would be a move up for Isaac Dogboe, the former WBO Super Bantamweight champion, from Super Bantamweight up there to featherweight, Carl Frampton's neck of the woods. And I got mixed feelings about the fight. I mean, if we just look at, the potential for a fan-friendly fight, a pleasing aesthetic, that given how Isaac Dogboe goes about doing things and how Carl Frampton goes about doing things, it promises to be an entertaining matchup if you're just thinking about the aesthetic.
Entertainment value.
But the reason that I have mixed feelings is because we know what Isaac Dogboe is coming from. He's coming off of 2 back-to-back physically taxing and difficult fights, difficult losses to Emmanuel Navarrete. Is it right for Isaac Dogboe to go right from those 2 fights into a fight with Carl Frampton at featherweight? I mean, it seems like a bit much, You think about the old sound bites, things that Isaac Dogboe has said in the past, that he actually wouldn't want to have to fight Carl Frampton because he looks at him as a big brother, You think about that stuff. And then you look at this and it's like, I don't know. I mean, I think it promises to be an entertaining fight. As far as how fight fans or what the fight fan should be concerned with, yes, I think that promises to be an entertaining fight given how both of those guys operate. They're both quality operators, and both of them, they're action fighters. That's what they are. They're not chess match guys. They're action fighters. So as far as entertainment value, I think it promises that. But overall, for the more educated boxing fan, for the boxing fan that, is familiar with both the aforementioned parties, with Dogboe and with Frampton, I'd have to say that, given what Dogboe is coming from, couldn't they set him up in some kind of a tune-up fight for his maiden voyage into the featherweight division? He loses 2 back-to-back fights to Emmanuel Navarrete to go upstairs and fight Carl Frampton. Isn't that a bit much?
Yeah,
I mean, for Christ's sake. We'll see if it comes off, because between now and December 14th, there's room for a lot of things to happen. Maybe they're on board right now, but they decide to change their minds as the fight date approaches. Maybe somebody gets injured. But I will say, in spite of it having the potential to be a very entertaining fight, I question whether or not this is too much, too soon for Isaac Dogboe, who's on the rebound. I mean, yeah, they're both on the rebound, Dogboe lost those 2 fights to Emmanuel Navarrete. And Carl Frampton lost that fight to Josh Warrington, okay? I get it. They're both on the rebound. But all things considered, isn't there a precedence to set them up in an
easy one?
Something a little lighter than a fight against each other? We'll see what happens. I mean, I do think it's a good card. For what it's worth, I do think it's a good card. But I got a lot of passing thoughts about this thing. I mean, they're talking about staging it in New York City, And you wonder that a card that features Carl Frampton, Isaac Dogboe, Mick Conlan, you wonder that this kind of a card wouldn't be better suited over there in the UK. Most of their fans are on that side of the Atlantic Ocean, you know? I'm not saying they don't got fans over here. I'm sure they got 1 or 2, 3, 4, whatever fans over here. But this really does seem like a card that would be better suited for a UK audience, yet they're staging it here in New York City. I don't know, you know. I'm going to watch it either way, regardless of where they stage the fucking thing. I'm going to watch it either way. But you know, it's a curious development, a very curious situation. In other news, Eddie Hearn is reportedly set to be meeting with Callum Smith, if he hasn't already.
We'll find out.
To discuss the particulars for his next fight, presumably against his mandatory challenger, John Ryder, in a fight that could be going down in November in Liverpool. And I've expressed my thoughts as far as what Callum Smith, or at least what I think, just in my humble opinion, what would make more sense for him than crossing the street, because that has become a conversation as of late, that Callum Smith seems to want certain things. He wants big U.S. names. But all things considered, you have to wonder if the pursuit of those kind of names would lead him to bigger paydays than staying right there where he is with the pool of options that provides. You know, Callum Smith, in all honesty, as far as I'm concerned, he's already in the right place. He's already where a super middleweight needs to be. A super middleweight who's looking to be involved in big situations. When you got guys like Daniel Jacobs, you know, notariable names, guys that have been in big situations of their own. When you got those kind of guys potentially moving into your weight class, when you have one of the other world champions at the weight, Billy Joe Saunders, crossing the street to your neck of the woods, now is not the time to go looking at what other motherfuckers have got. I mean, you can't say that you're gonna leave Matchroom, or you're leaving Matchroom in pursuit of big names that are based out of the U.S. when, you know what? You've already got some big names that are based on the U.S. right there on that side of the street. You got Canelo Alvarez. You got Gennady Golovkin. You got Daniel Jacobs, who could be moving into your weight class very soon. So you know, that can't be it. You can't say that I'm leaving Matchroom and crossing to some other side of the street because I'm looking to unify when, hey, guess what? One of the other world champions at your weight, he just crossed over to your neck of the woods, your side of the street. So you can't use that as an excuse either. Essentially what I'm getting at is it would reflect very poorly on the part of Callum Smith and on the part of Joe Gallagher if at this point in time they decided to leave Matchroom. Why? Well, it's going to look a certain way. It's going to look a certain way that you passed on an offer from Frank Warren back when Billy Joe Saunders was with him. It's going to look funny. It's going to look a certain way that you passed on that offer to fight that guy. And when that guy ends up crossing to your side of the street, all of a sudden, you start looking at other outfits. You start shopping around for different platforms and different networks. It's going to look a certain way. It is, in all honesty. I mean, if you're looking for a unification fight, you got one right then and there. If you're looking for big names that are based out of the U.S., not necessarily guys that are born here, but big names in this part of the world, you know? Okay, you're already on the same side of the street as a lot of those guys. So it would just read as excuses if Callum Smith were to leave Matchroom now, at this point in the juncture. And that would so incline people to ask, why is Callum Smith thinking about leaving Matchroom at this point in the juncture? Doesn't make a lot of sense. What's really motivating this move? You know, it would reflect badly, it would reflect poorly on the part of Joe Gallagher, on the part of Callum Smith, if they chose to do that right now. It'd look like they were trying to get away from something. In all honesty, that's what it would look like. And just in keeping with what Eddie Hearn's got cooking for the fall, apparently, Katie Taylor is set to be headlining a card over there in the UK in November. Recent reports indicate that the news hasn't changed, you know, as far as what's been being reported and what is still being reported. That move to 140, it looks like it's going down, and they're eyeing Cristina Linarda too as her first fight at the weight. You know, you gotta realize something.
That ain't no gimme fight.
What the reports are indicating is that the Delphine Pursoon fight, you know, there is a dialogue. They haven't turned their backs on that fight. They're not getting away from it. But if you look at how it breaks down, because I know a lot of people are critical. I know a lot of people want to say that, you know, she's avoiding the rematch, that she was given a gift, all this stuff. I know what people are trying to say, but understand something. You can't interpret Cristina Linarda 2 as Katie Taylor's first fight at 140 as some kind of lighter touch. That's what she's not.
No, sir.
Okay? That's what she isn't, you understand. For a fighter who's moving up in weight from 135 to 140 to be fighting somebody with the kind of concussive punching power that Cristina Linardo has, to challenge that fighter for her belt as her first fight at the weight, no, that's not a lighter touch. That's not the path of least resistance. I don't look at that as an easy out. And you won't either if you've actually seen Cristina in action. I think this is a bit of strategy on the part of Eddie Hearn. That's what I think this is. You'll notice that Eddie Hearn is still talking about Katie Taylor's mandatory challenges. And if she's got mandatories anywhere, it's for the belts that she's already got. And those are the belts at 135. Yet simultaneously, we're hearing news about a move to 140. Now, why would we be hearing these two sets of moves of sorts? You know, one, that Katie's got mandatories for her belts and she's going to get around to fighting them eventually. And two, that she could be moving up to 140 in her very next fight to fight Cristina Linardo too. Doesn't one suggest that she will vacate the titles that she's already won? Well, there's at least one scenario which would allow her to not only move up to 140 and fight Cristina, but at the same time keep all her belts at 135. What scenario is that? I'll tell you what scenario. Katie Taylor, being the undisputed champion at 135, makes her the WBO's super champion. Emphasis on super, because that particular designation allows Katie Taylor to move up or down in weight and challenge a WBO champion of her choosing at a weight of her choosing. That if you want to challenge the WBO champion at 130 or the WBO champion at 140, you can, because you're the super champion.
You understand?
So the way it could break down is that Katie Taylor goes up there, fights Cristina Linardo too for her, 140-pound title, then continues to use her designation as a super champion to go back down to 35 and defend her belts against her mandatories. Her mandatories like Chantel Cameron, the mandatory via the WBC. This is the scenario that would allow Katie Taylor to both go up to 140 and challenge for a WBO title, but at the same time defend her belts against her mandatory challenges. That'd have to be the way it breaks down. Because, if you're just talking about going up to 140 to go up to 140 and campaign at 140, presumably Katie would be vacating the titles that she won. But if they're talking about doing both, if they're talking about mandatories while at the same time talking about a move upstairs, well, that would have to be the way it breaks down. And challenging Cristina Linardo too affords her that opportunity. The thing is, you gotta beat her first. You gotta beat her. And that's not an easy fight, folks. That's not an easy out.
It's not a gimme fight.
Christina's dangerous. If they were looking to take their foot off the gas, if they were looking to go down easy street for at least one fight, they wouldn't be looking at Cristina. They'd be looking at that vacant blue belt, the vacant IBF title, and they'd fight some contender for it. If they were looking for a lighter touch, for a gimme fight, for something a little easier than what Katie Taylor's been doing, because she's been running through these champions and the difficulty level has increased. So if they were looking to just, get their foot off the gas for a second, they'd look at the blue belt. They wouldn't be looking at Cristina, and they wouldn't be looking at her belt. That's not an easy fight. Katie Taylor is set to have a very eventful 2020, because you got this Cristina Linardo 2 fight. You got the winner of Amanda Serrano versus Heather Hardy, both of which who have reportedly signed on to face Katie Taylor if they win. You got that. You got Cristina. You got the winner of Hardy versus Serrano. And you also have Chantel Cameron waiting in the wings for her title shot, for her shot at the green belt. And you also have the former WBC champion, Delphine Persoon, waiting for her rematch. Heavy is the head that wears the crown. Katie Taylor has a full plate. She really does, There's a lot of people that want a piece of her. A lot of people that want a piece of that action. And this is boxing, folks. Everybody might want a piece, but everybody can't get one. At least not when they want to. So I'm expecting Katie Taylor to be under the highlights for the duration of next year. I am. Because these fighters, they got a precedence to want to fight her. Chantel Cameron has a precedence to fight Katie Taylor because she's a mandatory. And Delphine Persoon has a precedence to fight Katie Taylor because, the performance that she put on warrants a second fight. Warrants a rematch.
She deserves it.
Just as well, we know that, in spite of how some people might feel about it, at the end of the day, at least based on the reports, the winner of Serrano versus Hardy is looking to fight Katie Taylor. So you got a lot of people that want a piece of that action, but they can't all get that action when they want that action, you know? I wonder how it's all going to break down, because these are preliminary reports. It could end up working entirely different once, you know, these plans are put in motion and things start to happen. So we'll see how it develops, but at minimum, what you can deduce based on this is that Katie Taylor has a very busy schedule for 2020. And finally, Michael Benson tweeted, reports seem to indicate that Jermall Charlo is going to be making his first defense of that, I don't know, I don't even know anymore, secondary. I mean, that's what they're calling it. They're calling it a secondary title.
What is it?
Yet, for all intents and purposes, Jermall Charlo is the WBC middleweight champion, but whatever. He's going to be defending whatever the fuck it is he's got against Dennis Hogan. Those of you out there may recall that Dennis Hogan, you know, arguably, he gave the 154 WBO champion, Jaime Munguia, the hardest fight we've seen in recent memory, and maybe the hardest fight of his career. A fight that some people feel Dennis Hogan deserved to win. Thing is, he's moving up for this fight from 54 into 60. Now,
let's be honest here.
In the spirit of full transparency, Dennis Hogan has fought well above junior middleweight in the past. He has. He has fought as high as light heavyweight, you understand? It's just that in spite of having fought in these higher weight classes, it's not like he was fighting top-tier competition up there.
He wasn't.
It's not like he accomplished something there or established himself there in those higher weight classes as an elite fighter, as a world champion, or at least as a contender. These are fights that happened very early in Dennis Hogan's career, whereas for the last 4 years, roughly 3 or 4 years, Dennis Hogan has been campaigning as a junior middleweight. That's where he's been the last couple of years. That's where all of his fights have taken place. Thus, this very much is a move upstairs to face what is arguably, at least to some, an upper echelon fighter. So what do I think about this fight? I think that this fight denotes what we're always talking about here on the channel. You know, Dennis Hogan, God bless him, he's not a big name. He's not. And this denotes the inability of the PBC, due to their own business practices, to get Jermall Charlo in a fight of some kind of significance.
Some kind of marquee value.
Now, I know what the PBC nut huggers are going to try to say. They're going to try to say, well, if he was good enough for Munguia, why is he not good enough for Charlo? Well, for starters, Jaime Munguia isn't as overinflated as Jermall Charlo. But just as well, when Jaime Munguia fought Dennis Hogan, that was because he was ordered to fight Dennis Hogan. That was a mandated title fight. That was his mandatory. That's why he fought that guy. He fought that guy to keep his belt. Whereas Jermall Charlo is fighting him as a voluntary. So for all the goofy dick-sucking bullshit that we hear in regards to the PBC from their nut-hugging fans, you would have thought that given the reputation that they have among them, that they could conjure up someone more interesting for their star pony in the show at middleweight than a guy that Munguia just decisioned.
Well, that's not the case.
Y'all can't do no better than that? Conjure up this guy sloppy seconds? That says a lot. I mean, if we're gonna be objective and call it down the middle, I don't even think it's a bad fight in all honesty. I don't think it's a terrible fight. I've seen worse fights than this. But I reiterate, given all the dick-sucking fanboying and pom-pom waving that PBC's fans often engage in, you really would have thought they could muster up someone more interesting than a guy we just saw in action against Jaime Munguia. That's all I'm saying.